Hey, it's me, John Beckerman, and you are watching the Letterman podcast with Mike Chisholm. And coincidentally, I am Mike Chisholm. That's your bit, right? That's your bit.
That's my bit.
I'm doing your bit.
Thank
you. La, la, la. Welcome to the Letterman podcast. My name is Mike Chisholm. All right, we got Steve Randisi part two of two. It was too big of a conversation, and we had to break it up into two episodes. In this episode here, in this second part here, we talk a lot of Johnny Carson stuff, but also we talk about the comedians that Merv broke into the business, and much more his business acumen. We talk more about that. Just a really fun episode. Just the conversation. It was like butter. Steve and I could talk like this, and we actually talked for about 45 minutes after it ended. We just shot the bull about this stuff. It's just so great to have somebody who appreciates from his perspective this genre that we all love so much, and Steve Randisi is that guy. Here is part two of my conversation with author of Merv Griffin, The Inside Story, Steve Randisi.
And I remember when that three-way talk show war was starting up, I can remember people saying, who are you going to watch tonight, Joey, Johnny, or Merv? Now you had a choice.
No VCRs, folks.
No, the VCRs were years and years away.
I experienced that. I experienced life before VCR and life after VCR at the perfect age as a Letterman fan. And right. I got to tell you, boy, oh boy, that VCR was a godsend.
I was the first guy on my block to have a VCR. I got mine in '78 on the old VHS format.
Wow.
And people thought I was crazy. They were like, how much television are you crazy? How much TV can you watch?
Oh, yeah.
And I said, well, no, I want to be able to tape certain things and certain programs that I miss.
Yep.
And, that was the new technology of the time of that day.
Yeah.
Just imagine if you had a VCR back in the formative years of
exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. All that is. So the journey for the book, how long did it take to once you got the concept and
right.
you became clear on it, was the work fast? Was it swift and come out very easily, or was it a grind?
It was something of a grind. It could have come out, I'm not the most prolific author on the block, and yeah. I write very, very slowly. I have very, very odd habits. I'm one of these odd people. I have to write in a public place. I have to sit in a coffee shop.
I dig
where
it.
Where other people are writing. They're sitting there with their laptops and their computers and their, and their tablets. And I sort of like extract energy from that.
Yeah.
I would be sitting there working on Merv, and a lot of college people would come over and say, what are you working on? I'd say, well, I'm writing a book about Merv Griffin. And then, of course, invariably, I had to explain to them who Merv Griffin was. They didn't know. They weren't even born when he was on the air. And I said, well, you watch Jeopardy and Wheel of Fortune? Oh, yes, sure, every night. You watch that show until the end of the episode, and you'll see it says on there, created by Merv Griffin. I said, that's who Merv Griffin was. He was an iconic daytime fixture. And Johnny was the king of late night, and Merv was sort of like the prince of daytime.
Yeah, absolutely. He was, again, and really until Rosie and Ellen,
Rosie O'Donnell,
no one in that medium. I mean, Donahue, great, Oprah, great, but that wasn't what.
Right.
No, we're talking like the variety show.
Right.
We got to get to.
To answer your original question.
God, thank you for paying attention and understanding, because I just go down the rabbit hole. I keep going. Yes, absolutely. Please do.
You were asking me how long it took to write the book. 5 years.
5 years.
5 years, right. Right.
Oh, that is a labor of love, my friend.
Yeah.
And
my Penny Singleton book was written during the pandemic. So we were sort of on lockdown at the time, when we were all quarantined a few years ago.
Yep.
So I couldn't write that in a public place. I had to do that at home. And I found that a little bit more challenging.
Different energy.
Well, it's a different energy. It's a different, when you sit, the worst thing for a writer is when you sit down and you're looking at a blank page.
Yeah.
Like, oh my God, I have to put words on that page. What am I going to do? Whereas when I'm out in public and I see people milling about, a color or a scent or something might stimulate something in my imagination. And that sort of helps with it. That's just the way I work.
No, it works for me too. My wife and I wrote a book and released it a couple of years ago now, 2 years. We just did the 2-year anniversary of it. and I know exactly what you're talking about now, but sometimes the gateway is hard to access, but once you access it and go through it,
Right.
I mean, I love writing so much. I'm probably starting a Substack. Actually, I am starting a Substack. I just don't know exactly when because I just want to get that part when you are in the flow. I want to
Sure.
get that out again, and I'm certain you must feel that as well.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's fun. And whenever I work on a writing project, I have a tendency to gain weight because after I get done writing a chapter, I reward myself with a burger or a milkshake or something like that. So
Yeah.
after I finish an article or a book or something like that, I have to go on a diet and exercise program and take the excess pounds off. So
Okay, buying the book. I don't have a copy of it. I'm getting a copy of it. What's the best way for me to get the copy of it? Can we get direct from you signed? Do you have any
sure,
more of those?
I'll send you one.
No, 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 no. But how? No, but people who, the dozens of
I
people
got,
who
I
have
got,
embraced
yeah,
the
of
Letterman
course.
podcast, who want to go down this path, what's the best way to get one of these things?
You could go on the Bear Manor Media website,
Bear Manor Media. Okay.
bearmanormedia.com,
Yep.
and look up the Merv Griffin Show, The Inside Story. And if you want the Penny Singleton book, that book, if I might hold that up,
Oh, hold them all up, man.
is called Penny Singleton, a biography. This is a fascinating lady. She's one of the most extraordinary ladies that I've ever known in my life. She was the first woman president of an AFL-CIO union. CIA union, I'm sorry, excuse me. And aside from playing Blondie, she was a trailblazer in her time. So that's, and she's also Jane Jetson, by the way.
Yeah. Oh,
Right.
I've got a good friend who is getting that over the holidays, and I'm going to get it. I'm going to buy a copy for him as a present, and you're going to sign it and send it to him. That is a
Which one?
really,
Which
really
book?
cool. That is very. What's that?
Which book is that?
The Penny one.
The Penny one.
My friend of mine he was a former Letterman writer, absolutely worships that era and these types of things. It's a perfect book for him. So I'm going to get that for
Right.
him. What else you got? What's the third one?
Oh, well, the third one is actually the first one that I wrote. And that was Behind the Crimson Cape. It's actually a film by film study of the movies that George Reeves made prior to, during, and after he played Superman. This book, unfortunately, is out of print. You can't get this unless you get it on eBay. But this is richly illustrated, and this is it's sort of like a different genre from what we're talking about here. But that was the first book. So George was first, Merv was second, and Penny was the most recent. Penny just came out January of this year.
Nice.
So, right.
Very cool. I'm just going to give a shout out to my boy Rick Sheckman. He was a producer for Letterman for 32 years. He passed away. He was my consigliere for this show at his memorial, and he's a huge comic book fan, and he and I, gigantic comic book fans, just from different eras, and so we would, we connected really, really, really well, and about 5 months before he died, as a DC comic book artist that I love, and back in those days when Shecky was with Late Show, DC's office was right across the street from the Ed Sullivan Theater.
Uh-huh.
So Shecky would go there, and he would go to the Mad Magazine floor, but also he would hang out with all of these amazing DC comic book, where they made everything.
Yeah.
And so he had all this stuff. He collected stuff like you do, like I do, and
Sure.
showing me some of these things. And then he just but he liked the old timey stuff. And so a DC comic book artist is a friend of mine who happens to live in my city. I'm like, hey John, shout out to John Delaney. Do you do like the George Reeves Superman? Like, I mean, he's like, oh yeah, that's my favorite. Yeah. And I got a picture of a George Reeves Superman and Shecky together.
Really?
And sent it to him, and he, we had an amazing moment of friendship from that. He absolutely loved the George Reeves Superman. He was such a fan of it. Where did you inherit that from? Where did you inherit that love from?
Well, that was one of the first shows that I remember seeing, because I was born in 1953. Yeah. Which is the year that Superman went on the air, and then it played, until he died in 1959. So I think every kid.
So you were indoctrinated in Superman the way I was with Star Wars. You were just
exactly that was the Star Wars of its time. Every little boy, put a towel around his shoulders and jumped, tried to leap onto the bed or something like that to pretend simulate flying or something like that. So Superman was our hero.
Yep.
If you grew up at that time, and all the girls wanted to be Lois Lane. They had their notepads.
Yep.
They wanted to be a girl reporter in the mold of Lois Lane. And Jack Larson and Noel Neal, who played Jimmy Olsen and Lois Lane, became very good friends of mine. They were interviewed for that book.
Oh,
that I just held up, and they both are gone now. But we were very close friends with
you know what? Let's go down that path a little further. Some of the people that you've met along the way that aren't with us anymore. I mean, I got a few of them already on in my world. Isn't it amazing how you can have this moment with these people where you get really kind of vulnerable? You talk about some of this stuff, and it's my men's mental wellness podcast. I did a 3-part series with my dad, who's going through dementia right now, and I mean, I'm always going to have that moment to kind of keep that alive. Who are some of the people, as in your unique role here, that you have met that have touched you and aren't with us anymore?
Well, I made a list recently of some of the personalities that I met over the course of, from the time I got interested in this, and I have 975 names on the list. So we'll be here until Christmas if you want to.
Wow.
But I'll start with the names that would ring out to most people. I was fortunate enough to meet Milton Berle a number of times.
Oh, my God.
And Sid Caesar and Danny Thomas. I got to present an award to George Burns. And these are all people that appeared on The Tonight Show with both Carson and Merv Griffin.
Yep.
People like that. I went around to all the autograph shows. I went to book signings. That's how I met Merv in 1980.
Yeah.
And he invited me to go on the Variety Club telethon with him, which I mentioned, with Monty Hall. He and Monty Hall were co-hosts. I have a picture here if I could just show you.
Please do, my friend. Show and tell is welcome in this show. Oh my God.
And what happened was, you notice we're holding a portrait. A friend of mine had done this charcoal portrait of Merv Griffin. And so we went down to the studio where they were doing the Variety Club telethon, and we wanted to give it to him. And my friend was too shy to meet Merv Griffin. He couldn't handle meeting somebody of that stature. So when Merv looked at that picture, he said, "You got to give this to me on the air." He said, "You got to give it to me on the air." And I said, "Well, Mr. Griffin, I don't think." He said, "Don't think." He said, "Just do it." And he walked away.
He's just a natural television guy.
I'm being shoved down on a stage in front of 1,500 people, scared to death. I mean, I couldn't. I was like Ralph Cramden. I was like, hamana.
The grin on your face, it's plastered.
But I managed to bite on a bullet and get through it. So when I saw
the picture again, that thing is just great. Look at this.
This is my favorite picture of him because it's a candid picture. I'll try to hold it so it doesn't shine.
Look at that. No, it's beautiful. It looks great. Oh my God.
Right. You can tell he's joyous in that picture. And these are experiences that you have. And when I went to work the following Monday morning, that was over the weekend. It was good water cooler conversation.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
All right. We don't get to do cool stuff like that anymore. The world is so different now.
Well, it is. But at the same time, I'm having the same experiences in the Letterman world right now. It's just with today's times, like, going to some of these functions and things like that. It's an amazing thing. I also want you to talk about the Johnny Carson story that you have.
Which one?
I wanted you to say that.
Well, I went out
right there. Which one?
I'll start with the first one. I wanted to meet him. And I went out there, and people said to me, "You'll never meet him. He's very, very guarded. He's very, very private. He doesn't talk to people. He doesn't like being approached by people.
Yeah.
He's somewhat aloof. He's almost sullen, at times. But I went to the Tonight Show, and I saw the first broadcast on a Monday. That was at a time when the show was taped and then played on the air the following day. There was a 1-day delay.
Yes.
Before, this is 73.
Yeah.
And he was not in a good mood that night. I remember at the end of the show, the audience applauded, and he kind of sneered and he walked off, and he didn't. But 2 days after that, he was in a jovial mood. He was really, really in a great mood, and he came up and he played Stump the Band. And I didn't sing. I mean, I could barely talk, let alone sing on national television. That wasn't going to be my thing. But he said to me during the commercial break, he said, "Are you going to sing with this lady?" And I said, "No, she's going to sing." So she sang a song called "Three Babes in the Woods." And, it went over. She was very, very nervous. And she said, "Oh, Johnny, I don't think I could do it." And he said, "Take 3 deep breaths." He said, "Just take 3 deep breaths." So she did it. And then she took the microphone away from him and she went to town with it. And Johnny said there, he said, "My God," he said, "for somebody who didn't want to sing," he said, "you just cut an album." So when it was over, he interviewed about 3 or 4 different people that night, and we were right in the front. I asked him for an autograph,
Mm-hmm.
and he completely walked past me. And I remember the lady saying to me, she said, "Don't feel bad." She said, "He can't sign an autograph for
Mm-hmm.
you because there are 500 people here.
Yeah.
He'll be bombarded with autograph requests."
Yeah.
But when he got back to the stage, he pointed to somebody. He said, "See him after the show." And to make a long story short, he sent the autograph. They kept us waiting in the studio for about an hour after the taping,
Yeah.
in an empty studio, which they would never do today.
Yeah.
They would never leave people alone
Yeah.
in a studio unattended like that.
Yeah.
But this guy came back with an envelope, and in it was a nice signed portrait inscribed to me by Johnny Carson. Well, there was a guy in Philadelphia who was a restaurateur whose name happened to be Steve, and he wanted to borrow this picture to put up in his restaurant. He said, "Let's put this up on the wall," he said, "because people will think Johnny Carson ate here."
Yeah.
So I let him do it. And when the restaurant closed several years later, I went back to reclaim the picture, and it was gone. So I wrote Johnny a letter, and he was nice enough to send me a replacement. I still have the envelope that it came in.
Yeah, I'm that way
And
too.
yeah,
Keep the envelope. Yep.
That night, the second taping that I saw, which was the same week, he was in a great mood that night. And I remember at the end of the show, Bob Newhart was the lead guest, and when the audience was filing out, the guests that night were the Pointer Sisters, Ronald J. Fields, the grandson of W.C. Fields, Larry Kurt, who was a hot singer at the time, and Bob Newhart was the lead guest.
Good Lord.
So when everybody was leaving, Johnny remained on the set, and he was talking with Bob Newhart. And whatever he was telling Bob Newhart, I couldn't hear because I was too far away.
Right.
Bob Newhart was cracking up. And Johnny was very, very animated. You could tell he was really in a good mood this night, which is probably why I got the autograph. And and then I saw him many years later in 1991 on the parking lot at the Beverly Garland Hotel in North Hollywood.
I love this story. This story. Yeah.
I was walking towards the end of the parking lot, and I saw this little red Jaguar coming towards me. And for some reason or another, I didn't get out of the way. I should have, but I didn't. And when I finally did, he was practically right up near me. He never honked. He never said, "Move your butt, get out of the way." He was right. And he drove past me. I went, "Oh my God." I said, "It's Johnny Carson." Good God. Am I in is this a Twilight Zone episode or what? So I went in to the hotel and I said to the desk clerk, I said, "I just saw Johnny Carson in the parking lot. What is he doing in North Hollywood in the middle of the afternoon?" This was June of 1991.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I'm not sure. I think it might have had something to do with the fact that his son had just died a week earlier. This is June of 91.
Yeah.
So the desk clerk said to me, he said, "No," he said, "he's been seen here a few times." Nobody knew why, but there he was. The interesting thing was later that when Johnny died in 2005, I was sitting in the restaurant of that hotel telling this very story. And then over the PA system, guess what we heard? The Tonight Show theme.
Yeah.
And I said to our waiter, I said, what is that? I said, why are we? He said, "Oh, that's the Tonight Show theme." I said, "I know what it is. Why in God's name are we hearing it?" But it came on just as I was telling this story of this parking lot encounter with him. And that was 91. That was the last time I saw him, because the following year, he retired. And then I think he did his last appearance with Letterman. That was what, 93?
Yeah.
93 or 94.
Yeah. The California trip in 93, I believe.
Right.
And,
is that the one where he came out and he didn't talk?
That's the one. Yeah. And there's a few different stories floating around of he had laryngitis.
Yeah.
And there are some, I've actually even heard it where, that's the story. Johnny was overcome with emotion.
That's right. I think it was the latter.
And I like to think it was the latter, man. Like I do. Listen, any insights as to Merv's reaction when Carson passed? I mean, near the end, I mean, yachts and I mean, one of his last things that Merv ever did on Letterman was the yacht thing. Do we know
Yes,
how,
yes.
was,
There's a record of it because the night that Johnny passed away, that was in January of 2005.
yeah.
Uh, um, Larry King did a special tribute to Johnny Carson on CNN, and Merv was on it. So was Dick Cavett.
Okay,
Right,
so we got to throw that on the watch list. I
right,
don't remember if I've seen that.
right.
That's a very important. That's okay. Yeah.
And Carson and Griffin were friends at that point. They had become good friends. They were having dinner together and socializing, going on. They had been on each other's shows,
Yeah.
and they had nothing but nice things to. And of course, Merv had nothing but nice things to say about Carson.
Have you read the Zemi book yet?
No, I haven't. It's strange you should mention that. I got a notice today in my email box. It's due on Monday.
Cool.
So I'm very much looking forward to the Zemi book. It's a shame that he passed away before he was able to bring it to fruition, to completion.
Yeah,
That it was.
it is, but I'm looking at it a little bit differently because this is like the ultimate phenomenal writer. Don't get me wrong,
Yeah,
but the ultimate fanboy who also happens to be a phenomenal writer.
right.
And the idea to me, I'm looking at it going, okay, so this guy writing a book, it's going to be different. And it was, the tone was, I really, really liked it. But then throw in the fact that, Thomas had to come in
Yeah,
and finish it for him and kind of break the fourth wall kind of a thing,
yeah,
almost a little bit in it. And that adds a dynamic to it that makes it unique. So
yeah.
that's kind of my take without spoilers. I'll spoil something little, but you probably know this already, but in the book, it talks about how Johnny Carson developed an email relationship with Jack Parr, kind of right up to the end. And I found that,
With Jack Park or with David Letterman.
no. Carson and Letterman always, yeah. Carson
Right,
Letterman has talked about his appearance
right,
on Johnny's yacht and for
right.
a nice night up and down the Hudson. Um, but I was more thinking that it's fascinating to me that near the end of both of their lives, that Jack Parr and Johnny Carson were corresponding via email. That just kind of made me feel kind of good there.
Well,
Um,
they had mellowed up by that point.
yeah, yeah,
Now you go back to 1963, right after Johnny had taken over the show for a couple of months.
yeah,
Parr and Carson didn't have nice things to say about each other.
yes,
Parr did make that. He made the one cogent comment. He said, "Well, he said I go to bed early." He said, "But what little I've seen, I liked."
yeah,
But here's the thing: in the '80s, here's another crossover. Jack Parr did 3 appearances on the Tonight Show with Johnny in the
yes,
'80s. And I think that speaks volumes.
absolutely.
Of their. I met Jack Parr one time. I didn't actually meet him. I was at 21 in New York, and I was there with a lady who was an actress who was a good friend of mine.
Yeah,
And over a few tables over was Arlene Dahl,
yeah.
Miriam Parr, Jack Parr, and somebody else. I can't remember who it was. And at one point, I had to go to the men's room as we were leaving. And as I was walking into the men's room, Jack Parr was walking out. And I said, "Oh, Mr. Parr," I said, "I enjoyed your latest book very much. It was called something. It has Saber in the title." Uh,
That feels like it's the perfect thing to say to Jack Parr.
and then he said, "Oh," and then he patted me on the back. He goes, "Well," he said, "you'll like my next one even better." And the next one was called P.S. Jack Parr, which ultimately I bought. I was able to get a copy. Oh, Don't Bend My Saber or something like that. It had the word saber in the title.
Okay.
It was a much earlier book, but he was a prolific author. He wrote a lot of books, and it's important to remember that when he left the Tonight Show, Jack Parr did a primetime show on NBC on Friday nights, the Jack Parr program,
Yeah.
and then later in '73, he was opposite Johnny. Most people forget that Jack Parr and Johnny Carson were actually opposite each other at one point.
Yeah.
There was a program called Jack Parr Tonight on ABC, which was produced by Bob Shanks, who was Merv's producer, because Bob Shanks had become the head of ABC late night programming at that point. But that was very, very short lived. But
Yeah.
that was the first. That show became famous for giving America the first glimpse of a young Freddie Prinze. He was on
Oh,
the
what a
Parr show
connection
before.
there.
He was on the Parr show before he went on the Carson show, and of course, when he went on the Carson show, he
That was
brought
when
that.
it happened.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's
So
what did.
it's like you okay, so I gotta say this. Number one, you need to have a podcast. And I'm sorry, like, and I'll
Oh
take you. You
gosh.
can come on this show as much as you want because I know we can do this forever. But you have like seriously, like the great Randisi in you. Like I'm saying, you would be you have a phenomenal. And I'm gonna mine this as much as humanly possible. You have a phenomenal width and breadth of experience. It's unbelievable. So you should
Wait,
have a
that's funny.
show.
I'm happy to hear that because I talk about this stuff all the time, and my family is bored to tears with it. I couldn't care less. It's like, who cares? You know,
My
this ancient
wife my wife made me start this show so she could get away from that a little bit.
get away.
Yes. We're gonna do one other Carson thing here.
Okay.
You blew me away with something that you told me that you have show and tell for. This is
Oh,
something that okay, so remember we talked about Don Giller?
yes,
I
yes,
checked
yes.
with him. Okay. I'm not gonna bury the lead. I have
Okay.
always wondered about the origin of Dave's double eraser pencil,
Pencils.
which I am so proud to have. And I
Well,
don't just throw out there that I have this to people. It came up in conversation today because I was asking Steve about some of the things he was going to bring, and he blew me away with one of the answers. And I don't know if this is out there or not, but if I didn't know it, clearly there's a lot of people who wouldn't know it. So
right.
can you please show me the item
Sure.
that you had brought
Here
on?
is one of the. I don't know if I'll bring it as close as I can, so you
Okay,
can
we
see
see. I
the
just no. You
writing
got to pull
on
it
it.
back. You got to pull it back for maximum
Okay.
effect. So
Okay.
tonight's show starring
Oh yeah,
Johnny
you want to see?
Carson.
Oh yeah.
Keep it going.
As you can see, there is an eraser on each end. And that is because Johnny was a drummer. He was a frustrated drummer, and he would sit there and he would tap these pencils while the band was playing, during the commercial breaks, and he would throw them at his producer, Freddie DeCordova. So I got one of these. This is one of the iconic Tonight Show pencils, and it says on here, "The Tonight Show starring Johnny Carson." Prior to that,
Mine says The Late Show.
The Late Show. He had NBC pencils, which were red, and they say National Broadcasting Company.
CBS pencils that are gray,
CBS.
and there's a gray eye on there.
Right. I happened to be at the Tonight Show one time with a friend of mine who worked at NBC, and the prop man was there, and he had a box of these. And I asked him, I said, would I be able to have a couple of those? And he said, oh, help yourself. So I dug in and I took a handful of them, and I gave a lot of them away. These are the only two that I have left. Now, these did come from NBC Burbank.
Wow.
This was given to me, and I'm sorry to say that I don't remember who gave it to me, but this is one of the holy, I call it one of the holy.
That is,
Yeah.
I don't say this very often, but I have, hold on. Seriously, Steve, I don't say this very often, but I have pencil envy. I do, man.
Well,
that is incredible that you have that. And that also solves a bit of a mystery. Now, the mug, let's talk about the mug.
The mug, again, this did not come from Johnny's desk,
yeah,
but it was made from the same mold that Johnny's was. It came from, the same mug shop. And on the back, it says, you can see, it says Johnny.
Fantastic.
Okay. Now, this was the early picture.
Yep.
In fact, this is the shot that he autographed for me that night in 70.
Oh my God, you're killing me.
It was that same shot that got stolen. That was his publicity picture at that time. Now, towards the end of his run, he updated the picture.
Yeah.
To this one.
Yep. And you got them both, of course.
Both, right? And they both say Johnny on the back. And this is Johnny's first TV guide.
Oh man.
This is Jody, his first wife, Jody. The date is September. What were you doing in 1954? Remember what you were doing in 1954? I was probably crying in my crib.
Yeah. I mean,
but he was on the over the years. He was on the cover of TV Guide many times.
Yeah, absolutely. But you never forget your first.
And then there's one when Merv was a big hit on the Tonight Show in the summer of '62. He was on the cover of a lot of magazines.
Wow.
And this is young Merv Griffin.
Yep.
At the dawn of his talk show career. So,
hey, you know what we haven't gotten to yet, and we have to. We cannot have this first of what I'm certain is going to be many conversations. And I'm grateful for it, but we got to talk about comedians. I mean,
sure.
We can't not, because Johnny gets, there's something called the Carson bump, but there was also a Griffin bump.
Right.
And I mean, one of the things that I marvel at when there's pride in his television career, the pride of discovering
New talent.
some of the talent, you know, that he has discovered. Woody Allen. I mean, you know, and I mean,
Right.
I've talked about this Jack Rollins documentary that we're doing, who's, you know, Woody's manager,
Right.
you know, who's also Dave's manager, right? And so there's so
Sure.
many connections here. Woody, but Merv Griffin, you know, kind of broke Woody in many ways,
Yeah.
and
Merv,
George Carlin. Oh, go ahead. Yeah, please.
Merv was crazy about. He loved Woody Allen, and
Yep.
I think he had him. I think he had him on when Merv was still filling in on the Tonight Show, when Parr was still hosting,
Yep.
and that didn't go over too well with Parr. But then during the summer, during that interim period after
Yeah.
Parr left, Merv had Woody Allen on a lot, and then he also had Woody Allen on his NBC show.
Yeah.
And Merv had Woody Allen on his very first CBS show in '69.
Yep.
Woody Allen was the lead guest. He had just released his film "Take the Money and Run,"
Yeah.
and so the guests were Woody Allen, Moms Mabley, not the young war, Leslie Uggams,
Yeah.
and Ted Sorensen, who was President Kennedy's speechwriter, and Moms Mabley. Moms Mabley was the den mother of the Merv Griffin Show in the 1960s. So that was, but he thought enough of Woody Allen to have him on as his lead guest on his CBS opener in August of '69. So, but you know, you talk about the Carson bump and all that. A lot of people associate Jerry Seinfeld with making his appearance, his debut with Johnny, but it actually happened on Merv.
Exactly.
America didn't see it because Merv was delayed for a couple of weeks because Merv was syndicated, whereas Carson's show went on the same night that it aired.
Mm-hmm.
But there's another one that history has forgotten about. Merv Griffin was the first person to put Tiny Tim on the air. Now, that happened in 1967. And, you know, Tiny Tim came out and, you know, with the long hair and the high falsetto voice and all that. Merv didn't know what to make of it. And it bombed. It didn't go anywhere. But then Tiny Tim went on Laughing in '68 and became something of a phenomenon. And then he went on The Tonight Show with Carson. And he was a big smash with Johnny. Yeah. And then ultimately the following year, December of '69, is when he got married on The Tonight Show. And that was the highest rated Tonight Show up to that time. That was December 17th, 1969. I was in high school at the time. So
2 years earlier, he's bombing on Merv Griffin. And then 2 years later, he's a national phenomenon. That's a crazy,
right.
That's a fad of fads. Right. That's crazy.
But Merv had a lot of people.
I'm going to go down the list. Richard Pryor,
Lily Tomlin started with Merv.
Oh my God. Okay. So Richard Pryor, like you think about like that, like what many still refer to as by the way, the Godfather of comedy. But I have an aside. Is Merv Griffin the Godfather of syndication? I feel like
no, not really. No, you know, he liked to say that that he was sort of like the Godfather of syndication. But there were always syndicated shows prior to Merv Griffin. The thing is, I think he was probably one of the first syndicated talk shows. But don't forget, as I mentioned, Steve Allen had a syndicated talk show, and so did Regis Philbin.
But the Run, like nobody touches the Run in syndication, right? Nobody touches it.
Syndication up to a certain point in TV involved reruns of old network shows.
Sure. Yeah.
Superman was a syndicated show.
Absolutely.
So was Highway Patrol. So was Whirly Birds. There were a lot of syndicated shows.
Yeah.
Shows that were, on a national level, but they were syndicated to individual stations where they could run them in whatever time frame, whatever time slot best suited their market. But Merv was a big hit in syndication, but I don't think he was an innovator in that. He was an innovator in bringing the theme show into. Now he was not the first. Steve Allen did theme shows.
Yeah.
On his version of Tonight.
Yeah.
But Johnny Carson was the one who elevated it. See, each host who came along the way elevated. They added a little bit something more to the genre. Steve Allen was very, very, frantic, very, very ad lib. Nothing was scripted. Jack Parr formalized it a little bit more. He added the sofa, the Davenport next to the desk, which later became, he was the one who popularized that format. And then Johnny picked it up from there. But each host brought something new to it.
And then if I could add that David Letterman brought in, if my opinion is, I don't know, whatever it is, rock and roll. That was the element that Letterman added, like Carson, his that was rock and roll, I think, was one of the major differences.
Right.
That attitude, and also, popularizing the music there that wouldn't play on Carson, right? And that
Yeah.
was something
Yeah.
that he added to it. Arsenio, of course, that's an obvious one. But even guys like Gary Shandling, who
Mhm.
is an honorary member of the club. He
Oh, he's
had his
great.
own. Oh, absolutely.
The
Is
Larry
there a
Sanders.
Gary? Was Gary? Gary was featured on Merv.
I believe he was. Yeah, I believe he
Yeah.
was. Because I
Um.
think there was a great crossover. Anybody who was on Johnny was on Merv, and vice.
Mhm.
You mentioned earlier today we were talking. You mentioned Charles Grodin. He was one of my
Yeah.
favorite. He was one of my favorite Tonight Show guests.
Oh, absolutely. And
That
then
that
Letterman.
that cat and mouse, that rapport that he had with Carson was just it was classic.
Have you seen David Letterman and Charles Grodin? Because Letterman continued it with him.
Did he really? No, I haven't seen that.
Don Giller has one of those compilations. He's got a Charles Grodin compilation, and it is like, if you have an afternoon where you're just trying to, just want to,
Get
immerse
through the
yourself,
day.
that is a phenomenal compilation.
Right.
Watching the evolution of Grodin, because it includes him getting his own show on MSNBC, because Letterman pulls Snyder and gets him for late. And so anyway, yeah, there's
Another top-notch comedian who made the rounds of all the shows was Rodney Dangerfield.
of course,
I mean,
absolutely.
my God, the guy is phenomenal. He was on Joey Bishop.
Mm-hmm.
He was on Merv. He was on Carson. You
Yep.
know, I always Don Rickles, Buddy Hackett, Rodney Dangerfield, Charles Grodin.
Yeah.
Those, to a lesser extent, I would say Robert Blake a little bit.
Sure.
Not quite up to that level.
Yeah.
But there were certain guests, that you didn't want to miss. Whenever they were on. But it's sad that, but fortunately they saved a lot of these shows and we could enjoy them over and over again. And they're going to
Yeah.
be
Well,
there
I'm gonna be doing
for
some.
generations.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm gonna be doing a big Merv deep dive after this. I'm excited. I'm really excited to do it. Um. Oh, I was gonna ask if he had contact with. Yeah, Frank Sinatra. Did Merv and Frank cross paths very often?
To the best of my knowledge, Frank Sinatra was never on the Merv Griffin Show.
Yeah.
I don't have the data in front of me, but I can't recall ever seeing him, and I don't think it certainly would have been mentioned
Yeah.
in one of Merv's books if he had.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because
Yeah.
Sinatra even filled in for Johnny in the 60s.
Totally. Yeah.
Right. And then, he had him on, and then he had him on again. I think the final time would have been November of 70s. In fact, November of 1976, they just reran that episode on the Antenna TV rerun that they show, of course. But no, I know that Merv and Frank knew each other, and Merv spoke highly of him. But I don't think that another person that Merv never had on was Jackie Gleason.
Oh, interesting.
And I suspect that the reason for that was because there was a bit of a rivalry between Mike Douglas and Merv Griffin.
Right.
And Jackie Gleason was very, very close friends with Mike Douglas. So maybe he felt he was being, disloyal to Mike Douglas.
Yeah.
But it's interesting, I grew up in Philadelphia where Mike Douglas taped his shows. I worked about 2 blocks away from his studio, the Fifth and Market studio in Center City, Philadelphia.
No
and
kidding.
I'm sorry to tell you that I never saw one single Mike Douglas show.
Oh,
my
man.
mother and my grandmother adored Mike Douglas, and they went to a lot of his shows. I never saw one show, but I saw 6 or 7 shows with Johnny. I saw a whole ton of shows with Merv.
Don't you love irony? Like,
yeah.
that's so ironic.
Well, I figured that was saying Mike Douglas. That was too easy. He was right down the street. But to see Johnny Carson or Merv Griffin was more of a challenge.
Yeah.
Because that involved getting on a plane and going to California. And as soon as I was old enough, I did just that.
George Carlin's another one that he broke. And I think about these people that just the ones that we just mentioned right there that he broke.
Yeah.
He broke voices of their generation.
Yeah.
Pryor was a voice of his generation.
Yeah.
Carlin was a voice of his generation. Hell, Woody Allen, a voice of his generation. You know what I'm saying? And these are people that he broke.
Brilliantly.
People talk about Johnny breaking comedians. Like, look at what Merv Griffin did to break comedians.
Yeah, exactly. He liked it when he was able to give people up. And not only that, he had a lot of first-rate singers. Like I
Yes,
mentioned,
yes,
Whitney Houston and Leslie
yeah,
Uggams and people like that was on. And then there were a lot of young up and comers like Gilbert Price
yeah.
was a singer that he had on a lot, and Rennie Santoni was a young talent. The guy who sang "I Saw Mommy Kissing Santa Claus," I think was it Jimmy Boyd. I think he was on Merv a lot in the '60s and early '70s.
I love that. Geez, I just have to note this, just because this is the Letterman podcast, and some of us go obscurely deep. There's a David Letterman story that involves Leslie Uggams, and
Right.
just poetically, Uggams is funny to me. If I'm going to open for somebody, Leslie Uggams is a good person to open for.
Mhm.
It's just funny. So there's a David Letterman Leslie Uggams story, and I just find it funny that that name has popped up in this episode twice. So anyway, so
At least
anyway, I just wanted to note that. So other singers though,
they're the ones that come to mind. I'm sure he had
yeah,
many,
Whitney Houston. I mean, my God,
right.
you know,
That was
um,
debut. There is another one. When Merv filled in for Parr that night in January of '62, he introduced a hot young singer, and her name was Aretha Franklin.
oh God, that's right.
That's right.
Yeah.
How can we forget that one? Aretha Franklin.
The godmother of soul. I mean,
Right.
my word. Um, a billionaire before people even knew what billionaires were.
Yeah.
He was that guy. And like he was as fierce of a force in television with the instinct of uh, a guide
The
or a
Riverboat
hunter.
Gambler.
Just in business, same thing. Same thing.
But
Just
he was a very smart man,
but
and
then
he took advice from people well.
oh, that's a very
And
nice little nugget.
he had a really good team of people behind him.
Mm-hmm.
And he listened well. He took advice well. Unlike a lot of people in show business who like to do things their way, and they wind up shooting themselves in the foot,
Yeah.
so to speak. But Merv was very, very smart, very, very astute businessman. And God love him. I mean, again, they don't make them like him anymore. I tried to make I tried not when I did my book. I tried very hard not to fawn. You had mentioned the fanboy
Yeah.
aspect of the Zimi book, and I tried very hard to avoid that.
Yep.
And I think if you read it, you'll see that I was objective.
Mm-hmm.
And I like Merv a lot. I mean, I spoke to some of his people and said, he could be difficult. He could be temperamental. He didn't like it when things went wrong, and he would blame other people. And one of his guys, his head talent coordinator, Don Payne, told me, he said, finally, I had to tell him, he said, Merv, he said, the problem is you. And everybody in the room was like, whoa.
Mm-hmm.
But, he had to tell him.
But like you said, he was a good student. He heard that, and he
took it well. Yeah, exactly. He took it well, right? Because I won't name names, but there were some people who didn't want to go on that show. There were some people who didn't want to go on with Johnny.
Yep.
And there's a reason for that. And
Dave had him too.
I think they all do. I think they all do. But it would have been great to see Frank Sinatra on the Merv Griffin Show, because Merv had a tremendous orchestra. Morton he had a 16-piece band, as Johnny did, with Doc Severinsen. And it would have been wonderful to have Frank perform at the Little Theater in New York, or on CBS out in Hollywood.
The Little Theater in New York. And
right next to the Sargers.
There we go. Thank you.
Right.
I said it, you spike it. You're going to Sargers in a couple weeks.
Earlier today, there's a connection between Carson and Griffin with that theater, because Johnny did Duty of Trust at the Little Theater from 57 to 62.
Yeah.
And then legitimate plays. The people who loved Merv Griffin were the Schuberts, because he insisted on doing his show in a theater. He did not like the starkness of a TV studio. He liked the intimacy of a theater. So the people who loved Merv were the Schuberts, because he rented the Little Theater from them, and then he went around the corner when he went to CBS and he taped out of the Court Theater, which is now, I think, James Earl Jones. I think that has changed names. That's on 48th Street in New York. But right next door to the Little Theater is Sardi's, which is my favorite restaurant. And all these guys, after the taping, they would go in there and they would hit the bar.
Yeah.
And they would party. They would have these after shows, and sometimes they would get lit before the show.
Yeah.
I think Johnny and Ed McMahon would go to Sardi's and have a few before taping. who the
I gotta
attractive.
go there next time in New York. I gotta go there.
Oh, I'm going there next week. Yeah, I'll be there
Yeah,
next
well,
week.
you know what? Next time I'm in New York, you're gonna meet me there. We'll eat there. That'll be good.
Oh, you would love it. They have great lasagna.
Oh man, I'm down for that. Yeah, Sardi's is, and of course iconic. Like they
Oh,
gave away. Yeah,
I got to mention, if you go to the
yeah.
Saunders, they have a display of books, theatrical books, and my Merv Griffin book is on the shelf there.
Oh, that's fantastic.
Yeah, I'm very honored. And whenever I go there, I'm like a little boy. I say, "That's my book that's up on the shelf." They're probably going to take it down now since I mentioned it.
Oh, it's so great. It's so great. I've got notes that I wanted to get to. I just want to make sure that we've got to all of them. Okay, original late night war, breaking comics prior, Woody, Carlin, failure, all the shows erased. Oh man, the walk on with Brooke Shields on Letterman.
Okay,
Did you catch that? One of his first appearances on Late Night with David Letterman. Uh, I believe she was a 17-year-old Brooke Shields came out during their appearance, and she's like America's sweetheart slash national sensation kind of a thing,
right.
and she's out there with Merv Griffin, and that
Oh
was
yeah, yes. I think Christopher Atkins was on the same show
yeah.
that time. I think that was 1980 when they were doing when they had done the film Blue Lagoon.
Yeah, I think that's exactly right.
Yeah,
I
I do
think that's
remember that. Yes.
um there was a joke. Oh, hey, okay. I don't know if this is serious or not. Okay, Merv made a joke, something about on his tombstone. After these
Yeah.
messages, I will not be coming back. Something was that the quote? Something like that. Is
For
that
many
on?
years,
Is it actually on there?
that's true. For many years, he said, I want my epitaph to be it'll be on my tombstone. I will not be right back after this message. And if you go to the cemetery, he's not in Forever Hollywood Cemetery. I think he's in, I've never been there, but I've seen it. It does say that. It does say Merv Griffin, and it's got his dates, 1925 to 2007. And it says underneath that, I will not be right back after this message. It's true.
How tacky would it be to get your picture taken beside
Oh,
that
people,
tombstone?
not tacky at all. I know people who have done it. I have a friend who came up to me one day. He said, Steve, I'm like you. I got my picture taken with Merv. I said, really? I said, let's see it. And he shows me this picture of him standing in front of Merv's gravestone. I said, well, I got him when he was alive. No, people do that all the time. They pose with their favorite. They do it in front of Marilyn Monroe's grave. They do it at Charlie Chaplin's grave over in Switzerland. They do it with Clark Gable, Rudolph Valentino, all the great iconic stars.
Yeah.
Their fans go there and they take photographs in front of the crypt if it's a mausoleum, or the grave if they're interred.
And what city is it?
It's in L.A.
It's in LA. Okay, okay.
Yeah, right.
Um, I was in California in May to go see Dave, and I just had a good trip down there. I met with Robert
Right.
Morton and had a really, really Letterman centric trip. It was awesome. And I would constantly be cutting across whether I was going to Kimmel, going to see Letterman, one of the two times I went and saw him or whatever. And I'd be walking down Hollywood Boulevard, and I probably took 5 pictures of Merv's, the star.
That's on Vine
It's-
Street. Yeah.
yeah, on Vine. Yes. Yes. That's
Did you know that? Did you know that Johnny Carson's star, ironically, is a few feet away from the Hollywood Palace Theater, where Merv taped his show from 72 to 76. If you go on Vine Street, across the street from the Capitol Records building,
Yep.
a few feet down is Johnny Carson's star on Vine Street. And I always thought it was ironic that star was not far away from Merv Griffin's home, his home base of the Hollywood Palace. Because when he went back to syndication for Metro Media, he taped at the Hollywood Palace Theater, which had been Jerry Lewis's home. When Jerry Lewis did his talk show, it was from the Hollywood Palace. So that place, that theater goes back to 1927. That's where Richard Nixon did his famous Checkers speech. Lucille Ball did her famous radio show, My Favorite Husband, with Richard Denning from there. Ralph Edwards did This Is Your Life. It's a very famous facility.
Good Lord.
Right.
I love that stuff. Again, I think I mentioned this. I don't believe in coincidences. I flat out don't.
No, I don't either. Right.
It certainly wasn't a coincidence that you and I were to meet. Hey, special thanks to Rob Cates for setting up this intro. You were exactly right, brother. We are just peas in a pod. Before we finish up here on your first appearance on the Letterman podcast, let's put the book up again and say the best way to get it.
Ah, Merv Griffin, the Inside Story, is available from Bear Manor Media, bearmanormedia.com, or you could get it quicker if you order it from Amazon.
Is there a way to get it signed?
You have to mail it to me.
Okay.
And
Well,
I'll be happy. I'll be honored to sign it for. I'm constantly going to the post office with a shopping cart of books that I mail back, and then people say, "Oh, I got the envelope, but there was no book inside it," and then I have to sign. I've lost a fortune recently replacing books because the post office.
Oh my gosh.
Either it goes through a conveyor belt and the book falls out, and the envelope gets delivered and there's no book inside. But I'll be happy to sign it for anybody. They can email me and work it out that way. But the best way to get it is either through bearmanormedia.com or through Amazon. I think the Penny Singleton book is also available from Barnes and Noble. And
oh,
Walmart.
cool. Yeah, our book went to Barnes and Noble too. That's where a lot of, yeah.
A couple of other platforms that's available on. So, no, I would appreciate it. I'd be honored. I'm always happy to sign a book for anybody.
Oh, that's fantastic. I really appreciate this. I'm gonna do a really quick stay on the line here. I'm gonna do a real quick outro, and I'll be right back, and we'll say our goodbye privately. Steve, you're fantastic. Thank you so much for appearing on the Letterman podcast.
I hope next time you have me on with Rob, so we can have a.
Oh yeah. Oh, that episode's gonna write itself. I'm just gonna make the popcorn and listen to you two go. This is amazing. I appreciate you very much. Just stick here, and I'll be right back.
Thanks for having me.
Oh, of course, man. Of course, my friend. That's it. That's why we do the show. And I mean, I said it, this show was living proof as to why we do the show. It explicates that term and explains it, puts it right in front of you very, very simply and easily. And to understand, this is exactly why we do the show. We're so grateful for Steve for coming on here. I don't have the Merv Griffin book. I'm getting it. I'm excited about the Inside Story. And just really, really grateful for this show. We got one sponsor only with the Letterman podcast, hello-deli.com. If Rupert still has merchandise, you can get Late Show with David Letterman t-shirts. You can get Late Show with David Letterman mugs and much more. This has been another episode of the Letterman podcast with Mike Chisholm. Coincidentally, I am Mike Chisholm. Thank you and good night.
Bravo.
Overcoat and underpants.